When I did my Black Lives Matter video a few months ago, I was very critical of the people engaging in violence. I was critical of the people who were justifying the violence. In fact, I called those people, quote, "you psychopathic scumbags." And I was also critical of the people who were too spineless and arrogant to extend empathy to the people committing the violence to try and understand why people felt the need to go out and burn shit down in the first place. And here we are again in 2021, which has been great so far, and I'm about to do the exact same thing all over again. And just like last time, I said what I believed, and I didn't care if it upset people, and I don't care now. So let's start with the basics. It is wrong to commit and engage in political violence. People who believe that political violence is a productive strategy are people whose lives are miserable and devoid of meaning, so much so that instead of taking responsibility for their own insufficiencies as human beings, they decide to role play as warriors of whatever stupid ideology they have allowed themselves to be possessed by. And the right-wing protesters who stormed the Capitol building and burned and looted, I don't know if they looted, well, they did loot because the frickin' guy took the podium. Those people are cowardly, and to think that that is the best use of their time is pathetic. As far as the people justifying the violence on Capitol Hill, I see very little of that, to be honest. The only people who I've seen do that are the, what would you call them? The cockroaches on the alt-right, the white supremacist people, Nick Fuentes and the like. Even Trump said for the protesters to go home and be peaceful. Of course, he also said, this is what happens when you let elections get rigged, so we should remember that when we do a post-mortem on all this bullshit. But when it comes to the question of why is any of this violence happening in the first place, I hear almost nothing of substance, whether it's from politicians or journalists or my peers watching this video. The people with the loudest opinions are acting like spoiled children trying to use this chaos to further division so they can score points for whatever team that they think they're on. And that is so pathetically stupid because whether you like it or not, we live in the same country and we live in the same communities. And if you are too emotionally and mentally incompetent to want to unify and make peace with the other side, the Trump supporters, rather than start a civil war, then you are as worthless as your opinions, and you should just shut the fuck up. So let's step back and try to understand why the events transpired the way they did. Because if you were against the violence that BLM was committing, then it's vitally important to understand why it was happening in the first place. For BLM, it was racial injustice and economic inequality and centuries of neglect by the leadership that was supposed to be representing them. So let's think for a second and ask ourselves, why would a white working class Trump supporter feel the need to go riot in the nation's capital? Well, let's see. Since the day Trump took office, the entire media and political establishment set out to destroy him. They spent 2 years pushing an entirely manufactured bullshit Russian conspiracy theory, of which not a single person in Trump's entire administration was found guilty of being linked to Russia in any way. Not Roger Stone and not Paul Manafort, who were both convicted on separate charges. The media spent 4 years manufacturing lies about Trump supporters, whether it was the Covington kids, which was complete bullshit, and which CNN's retraction you can't actually find on YouTube unless you have the link, which I've put in the description below so you can see it for yourself. They pushed the Jussie Smollett fake hate crime, which was an attempt on the part of a privileged little scumbag to try and, further a race war. They gaslit everybody on the violence caused by BLM and Antifa, and literally egged it on until the ratings started to plummet because of it.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
They spent 4 years talking about how these poor white people have all of this privilege and are the reason that their black neighbors suffer, while white opioid death rate skyrocketed, suicide rate skyrocketed, while they didn't have, their way of life was disappearing because the manufacturing and energy sectors were getting wiped out. And while the actual privileged people watched this happen, they just thought, well, you know what? These people are just dumb, bigoted rednecks, descendants of slave owners. And they don't actually matter because their views are not as progressive as all the enlightened gender studies majors. So if you cannot understand how after 4 years of being lied to and belittled by the Democrats, by the media, after having watched their president lose and watched their party lose both the House and the Senate, why some white working class Republicans would feel the need to go commit violent riots in the protests stupidly and unjustifiably. But if you can't understand why they did it, then you are as blind and unempathetic as the people who couldn't understand why BLM was rioting. It's not about justifying the violence, it's about understanding it so that we can prevent it from happening again and maybe have a chance of healing what increasingly looks to be like a fatal political divide. So how about we all stop making ignorant fucking social media posts calling literally your own friends, family, and neighbors subhuman fascists who, by the way, you wouldn't have nearly the degree of privilege you most certainly have without them. And instead, let's try to pay attention, be informed, and seek to understand the people we disagree with. And I know it's hard because we have been conditioned as a generation to just watch people suffocate and bleed out on the same social media timeline where we share funny memes and funny jokes and we laugh about, hey, our friends are suicidal or on Xanax or they hate their lives and they hate their families. And it's like, yo, we have to do better because if we can't or don't, then no one will. And I am 24 years old and I am done expecting other people to solve problems that I caused because I did not speak up when I had the chance. And so I'm making up for that now. Fair enough? Good luck and Godspeed.